Join me on the ascending path towards consciousness, evolution, revolution.
Hey, what's up? Art Manchino here. I just wanted to say I've studied and taken in a lot of information over my lifetime, and I can tell you there's some things I've learned that I think the whole world needs to know, and then there's some things I learned that I wish weren't true that I still think the whole world needs to know. But right now I'm going to focus on what I think is the most important thing that, I think that people should be focusing on. And that is how to essentially work your existing body, your mind, your brain, how to access the greatest expression that you can fulfill in this form. Let me begin by saying that prior to coming across this information, I pushed myself a lot, physically, mentally, and I excelled. Like, let's say in weightlifting, I was really strong, sort of supernaturally strong. I ended up being the strongest guy in my high school the same year the football team won all of Northern California division championships. So there were some strong guys at the school that I went to. Also, I taught myself martial arts, and I essentially ended up being able to beat every black belt I ever sparred in many different styles and forms without ever having gone past white belt. I would go to some schools where the teachers would somehow know that I wasn't going to hurt anyone, and that I was capable enough to be able to spar black belt. So, and like I said, I beat everyone I ever sparred. That doesn't mean I never lost, but like, let's say the one time I did lose to someone, they were essentially as agile as I was, as fast, but they had more reach. And not only that, but they had this move that was quite awesome, to tell you the truth. But I learned it, I studied it, and you'll find, if you do sparring, that kind of thing, that people train and then they kind of get stuck with certain movements, so you can end up predicting what they're going to do and use their own training against them. But anyway, the point is, I excelled physically, and through that I learned how to focus my mind. And so I ended up combining, I call it activation, I used to call it meditation, but truthfully it's mainly understanding what we are and how we can excel, not just physically but mentally, and not just mentally but spiritually, and not even spiritually but actually communing with what people call source energy. So I'm talking about real powerful stuff here. And it wasn't until I was about 22, 23 that I came across this information or these insights. And although all of my other information, most of it I believe is acquired through research, knowing where to look, knowing what sources to really trust. And it helps that I've been doing this for a long time, so I've seen how a lot of information has gone south, and what was considered trusted sources you can't trust anymore. So I have that, I guess, luck that I was able to tap into information when it was pure, more pure. Anyway, so let me begin by explaining the thought process as to what I'm referring to when I'm talking about tapping into a higher energy source. And essentially, all we are, when I first started connecting to this energy, I had a question that I could never shake, and that is, why was I here? What is this ride about? And that was about 13. I had a lot of circumstances around me where I felt powerless and had a lot of questions and a lot of responsibility. So I felt like I needed to really find out, what is this right about, before I could make a decision as to what I'm going to be, who I'm going to be. And so I set out to answer that question. Why am I here? So when I started my journey to want to connect to Source itself, it was based on who did I want to emulate. And the answer to that is, I wanted to tap into the knowledge that, let's say, Jesus, Buddha, Einstein, Tesla, the greatest minds I considered to have existed ever, philosophers, great philosophers, so on and so forth. And I realized that, like someone like Einstein, they had to have tapped into, not only were they smart, but they had to have tapped into a universal knowledge that was deeper and greater, and the universe revealed itself to him, as well as Tesla, and precious few other people that I can tell in history. So, having been a smart kid, I was asked to skip the 3rd grade just because, I used to think really, 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 really fast. And I can remember, like, learning how to read, and then everyone taking turns reading, like, let's say, a paragraph of a storybook. And when it got to me, I would read really, really fast. And the teacher, I can recall this experience where the teacher asked me to read slower. And I started to, and I actually started to feel like I was getting dumber. It's like I had to slow my own mind in order to adapt to the surrounding environment or the intelligence of others. So I was a really bright kid, and that continued up until junior high, and then I had testosterone introduced into my body, and girls. So I started focusing on that, and I don't regret it. So, but the point is, I was a smart kid, so I realized that, like, people like Einstein and Tesla, they weren't just smart, they had tapped into some higher knowledge, and I wanted access to that. So what ended up happening was, okay, so I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, okay, I have enough knowledge under my belt, a little bit of physics, physiology, chemistry, all of this stuff. And I thought, okay, it's time for me. Here, we got to move you, butter. You got to go. Go. There you go. So I was like, I'm ready to start learning what is this knowledge they tapped into. And I thought, okay, yes, I do have this knowledge, but I don't want to start with that, because I know every, 5 to 10 years, there's a new paradigm shift. There's a new understanding of reality that changes everything. And so I didn't want to start with the knowledge base that I had. I wanted to start very basic. It's almost like emptying the cup before you fill it kind of thing. So I thought, okay, the question came to me, which I asked Source, and that was, what am I? And I had already worked out that at the most basic, that the body that I was given is basically an instrument that I have to perceive what reality is, or to perceive the different energy forms around me. For example, your eyes pick up light waves, your ears pick up sound waves, high pitch, low pitch. Going back to the sight, different colors, different frequencies, sound, high pitch, low pitch, different frequencies. There is nose and taste, smell and taste, and that is chemical. There's also touch and many other senses, interoception, it's how your body senses your own blood pressure, many kinds, magnetoreception. There are animals that also have specialized senses, like, let's say, sonar, or fish can detect vortices in the water, so on and so forth. So there are all these different energy forms around us, and how keen your senses are allows you to perceive more. Like there are people that, for example, can smell more. It's more refined, or have clearer vision, or so on and so forth. So, so I thought, okay, your body's an energy instrument. And so right then I was already starting to kind of formulate and work out. Well, I thought, well, wouldn't it make sense that if I can take in more energy, or have more information that I could perceive, that then I would have a better understanding of what reality is, because I was inputting more information. So later that turned out to be true. So, but I thought, okay, well, that's a very simple breakdown of who or what we are. I wanted an even more simple explanation. And so I asked again, what am I? And the answer was, well, all I am is mass. And mass has an integrated property associated with it, as far as we know, for all time space. And that is that mass has a gravitational pull. And the bigger the amount of mass, the greater the pull. For example, the Earth is big enough to hold the moon in orbit, and then the sun is big enough to hold all the planets, including the Earth, in orbit. And so while we may have some kind of gravitational pull, it's very negligible, it's small. And the difference between gravity and weight is, let's say you go to the moon. Because the moon is smaller, it has less of a gravitational pull of your body towards it. So you'll weigh less than you would on the Earth, but you're still made up of the same amount of stuff, or mass. So right then it hit me, okay, that we are so wired to gravity that we really don't perceive it. Like automatically, the way I'm sitting, for example, and holding myself, I don't have to think about it. It's automatic. It's so ingrained that you don't think about it. So going back to taking in more information from your environment, I realized, well, I started formulating ideas, and it was just coming to me one after another. It was being revealed. That's why I consider this information having been divined. And I came upon that conclusion years later. I was thinking, okay, while you're smart, there's no way you could have put all of that together linearly, like in a row, and have all this knowledge sent to you perfectly. And over the decades after learning, I realized that I was spot on. And the more the science would come out, the more it made sense in different levels, even deeper. It was more revealed, in other words. So, and that's one of the things I asked for as far as wanting to manifest. I said, not only did I want to have these beautiful connected experiences, but I wanted to have the science behind it so that I can explain it to linear people, linear thinking, or people that just want proof. Now the thing is, with this kind of stuff, it's like either the science is hidden, or no one has put these things together like I have, and I've waited for decades, really, for, like, let's say scientists to catch up. Like, what was I going to do? Go back to school and study neurology just so I could write a thesis and explain to the world? I thought, people will catch on eventually, and this will just become common knowledge, but it's not happened. So here I am explaining some of these insights to you that I believe are the most important. So how could you take in more information from your environment so that you want it to be clear information, correct information? Well, among all the senses that you have, one of the greatest ways to generate your senses is essentially your position in time-space. And so your position, time, space, you can stimulate or generate electricity. Like when you see your rods and cones in your eyes pick up these colors, and this information is converted into real electricity in your nerves. Same with hearing, same with nose and taste. It could be chemical, but it's changed to actual electric currents in your nerves, and that information is passed to your brain. Now, movement works the same way. You stretch the muscles, the ligaments, mechanoreceptors are stimulated, and the thing is, you can generate a lot of electricity through movement. Now, why is that important? Well, what ends up happening is your body can be viewed as a generator, and this is my paradigm shift, and it happened a long time ago. And I think people need to realize, if they want to, like, let's say, focus their mind, they have to use their body. There's actually a hierarchy in order to access source. A hierarchy, and by hierarchy I mean like there's steps, like one door opens another. Working out, for example, and having pushed myself physically greatly with great success from a young age, it takes me 2 hours of intense physical exercise, all different kinds. It could be dancing, it could be mixed martial arts, semi to moderate intensity could be dancing. I don't know if I said that already, but I love dancing. So and what ends up happening is you super focus your mind, and there are some agencies, intelligence agencies, that have put together that one of the key elements to manifesting, which is basically making the universe more malleable in the direction that you desire, that focusing is the main component to manifesting. And I'll include a link to that information below, where normally your brain works like a lamp. It's sort of like a diffuse light, whereas when you're focused, it's more like a laser. And this, I believe, has to do with the particle wave duality of the nature of reality. What you do when you focus on something, you are essentially taking it from its wave state and changing that more to particle, or bringing it more to the material plane. So I'll explain more of that later too. There's something called the double slit experiment. It's one of the most amazing, I think, experiments that had been done, and it shows how that works, just focusing your mind on something, changing its nature more from wave to particle. So anyways, these are all things that came later. I was doing exercises that years before that delved on that property, but I didn't know. I just knew that, these things, like I said, were revealed to me. So I learned the process. I was able to do the impossible. And then, even now, I still receive information, and I'm thankful for that, from the universe, that gives me more and more like insight as to how something worked or why it worked. So yeah, essentially the doors, if I'll just kind of explain the process, are: use your body to focus your mind, use your mind to tap into certain frequencies. And the frequencies you want to tap into, it's actually, I think the reality is a lot of different frequencies, and then direct current. And the direct current is, like, let's say, the template of the universe. And when I would focus my mind, and I was thinking, well, what frequency would I want to work with, if not the most powerful? And so I believe, like I said, it's a direct current, and it's source energy. Now, I define source myself. Here you go. You got to go over here, baby. So I define source myself, and my definition of source is essentially that it's the purest energy form in the universe. So let's say if that's true, what does that mean? Well, firstly, it would mean that this energy source is the most pure in the universe. That means that it can't cavort with other energy that is less than it. Otherwise, it becomes not the purest form of energy in the universe. And automatically I thought, well, if it can't change, then that means if you're trying to connect to it, you have to go towards it. So you have to change your vibration towards it. And how do you do that? Well, firstly, you have to work out to focus your mind. And now, before I get into, I'll quickly explain okay, source energy is the purest in the universe. You want to connect to it. How do you do that? Well, firstly, you need to focus your mind so that it is focused enough. And the exercise also builds up all this energy and turns your brain, like from a lamp, it's almost like a dimmer switch. You turn it up and it turns into laser light. So when you're exercising, you are literally generating power, and the movement, all that extra electric stimulus goes to your brain. And the part of the brain that had been revealed to me is a part of the process, and to this day I think it's still the latest information and still cutting edge, because I've never heard anyone else really talk about it in this way. Like, okay, it's called the reticular activating system, or RAS is the acronym. And I started to listen to some motivational speakers for the first time in years, like 2 years ago. And all of them were bringing up this part of the brain called the reticular activating system, and how it's responsible for focus, awareness, arousal. These are all mind things. Consciousness. So we're talking about elevating consciousness. This part of the brain has to do with that. And those are all very important things. Also, it determines the hierarchy of importance as to what's around you. For example, if a lion appears all of a sudden, I'm going to be paying attention to that lion. It's for survival. It's also pattern recognition. If you think of a red car, you start seeing red cars in the street. If you're looking for your keys, your brain starts to look for the shape of keys. So it's important. Now, that's all they tend to mention. There are other properties. It's responsible for sleep-wake cycle, and a few others I'm sure I'm not mentioning now. But the one that I found to be most interesting, I mean, the other ones are definitely interesting, but different and important, is that this part of the brain is also responsible for firing off your extensor muscles or anti-gravity muscles. Well, immediately I had asked a friend that he was doing a neurology program way back when, and I asked him, I thought it was interesting the way the students would talk about what they were learning, and I asked him, I said, what's the most coolest thing that you've learned? And he mentions this, that this part of the brain affects the anti-gravity muscles. And so that's also why I say, I was divine this information, because I knew right away, like I put it together. I was like, well, that's interesting. I wonder if you can reverse engineer the reticular activating system so that when you do exercise, anytime you do exercise, running, you're firing off your extensor muscles, your postural muscles. So my friend mentioned this part of the brain called reticular activating system, and he mentioned that it fires off the anti-gravity muscles or your postural muscles. Anytime you exercise, you have to hold your body correctly, keep your balance, so on and so forth, so you're firing off your reticular activating system, let's say in something like running. And so I thought, can you reverse engineer this and cause your brain to be more focused through firing off your extensor muscles? And it turns out, because I was able to tap into this power, or these powers, unlocking these features, that I had never come across before. Like when I first tapped into this, it was unreal. The way I felt was super powerful. And I knew it was something that was very different than anything else I'd ever tapped into. It's like I'd had so many natural highs, beautiful highs, and when I tapped into this state of existence or being or consciousness, I knew that I tapped into something that was completely different. It was like, I remember looking down at my hands thinking, what is this? You know, it's like I'd never heard anything and experienced anything like that. And I felt this energy that was coursing through my body. And I remember I looked at my hands, and the hair on my arms were elevated, and the back of my neck. And it was really powerful. And the first thought I had was, I feel like I can do anything. And so I thought, the second thought was, I feel like I can do anything. And so the third thought was, well, let's see. Can you do anything? And, I started off with basic physics, the mass, gravity, integration. So it's not like I wasn't trying to use reason and logic, but the first thought that entered my brain was, okay, well, fly. And immediately I wrote it off. I'm like, come on, that's just crazy. And so I thought, well, that's something I would want to do. And I thought, well, geez, what would be impossible to do? I was only 22, 23. So I thought, what would other people consider worthy of, tapping into? And I thought, well, becoming younger. That's like the holy grail, or, whatever, of manifesting, is trying to become younger. And so, like I said, 22, 23, there was no reason why I needed to become younger, but I went with it, and I was divined the exercises as to how to do it. So this was the third day of having tapped into this powerful energy. I started off not feeling anything until the third day, and then when I started practicing that day, I felt this power, and that's when I said, I feel like I can do anything. So then once I said that, and I set my mind to become younger, it took me 3 days of these exercises. Butter, you gotta go. Of these exercises, which basically, it was revealed to me that I thought, well, first, what is becoming younger? What does that mean? And so I thought, well, thinking neurologically, I know that the younger you are, the more impressionable your nervous system is. For example, a kid sitting at a windowsill where a bird lands, right in front of them, they're very excited. They'll, oh my God, look, a bird. And so their nervous system is very excitable. Whereas, someone who's older, that happens with a bird. Yes, it's still interesting, but people aren't going to be jumping up and down, oh my God, even though it's just as beautiful an experience. So I thought, okay, younger people are more open to this sort of stimulation. So and I realize part of that is, like, let's say, how open your heart is. And, these things just came to me, and, like I said, it's not chance. And so I realized, well, as you get older, there's also you close your heart a little more. So, and that's through protection. It's like it gets hurt, you don't want to get hurt, so you protect it a little bit. But then what that ends up happening is you're closing yourself off to potential energy, to potential experience, which is the greatest, by the way. Love is the greatest experience you can have in this form. And so I thought, okay, open up your heart. And I realized during the exercises that I was doing, it was essentially working out physically to focus the mind, and then that took 2 hours. And then there was a third hour, and the third hour shifted from physical plane, which all of that was just to focus the mind, and you push yourself. The idea is to push yourself so far that you tire your brain I know it sounds interesting. It's like you're tired, you're working your body, but the idea is you push your body so far that your brain gets tired itself of telling your muscles to keep going, to keep pushing. And what happens is, what ends up happening is you go from a particle state, which you're really working with when you're exercising. You're paying attention to the physical world, and that's just the way it works. You're here, and you have to pay attention to this plane, and that's the way to do it, is addressing it by movement. And so what happens is there's sort of a separation where you're going from particle state, material world, exercise, physical, to there's a letting go. And let's just call it Mancheno's transition towards mind. And essentially what happens is you go from the particle state to the wave state now. And this is immediately, as soon as that door is open, that's door number one. What you do is you have to know already where you're going to focus your energy, where you're going to focus your mind. It's because you don't just want it to just go, okay? You want to know already what the goal is, and the goal is to connect to source itself. So now the process is, well, focusing on this energy. And so what's that energy? Well, the energy is essentially, I'm going to give you how I had, it was an insight, it was revealed to me, a revelation, a vision. I call it a vision because I had this vision, and that was, imagine all the energy in the universe in this circle, okay? The good, the bad, including source energy, and anything in between. And in this vision, I put myself right in the center. And I thought, that's interesting. And I thought, well, what I realized, why was I in the center? I thought, well, I get to choose what direction or what energy I work with. You're given that in this form. And I realized that from the center to the very top was just a direct current or a line. And immediately right, as you go away, it's high frequency, and it gets lower and lower and lower until it's polar opposite. So I associated the direct current from center to infinite top. You see, as I worked and connected to this energy, I realized exercises to help me to stay connected, to know where to focus, and to even get deeper, deeper connection to this power that I wanted to tap into. Now, also I associated this particular direct current from center to infinite top, well, associated with love, light, purity. Purity, like I'm telling you, is the most important element to focus on. And this is what I would do. Once you focus, well, what do? There's a position that is the most powerful, and it's almost like you're a tuning fork. And that is, you have your hands up and your legs kind of spread, and you're looking up, standing. And I would get to on the balls of my feet even, and you look directly up against the lines of gravity. So, and one insight I've had is you put your third eye towards the lines of gravity, which goes directly down. It's like it pulls towards the center of the earth. And so you're making yourself this tuning fork, and then now this is where you get into the third hour, where the workout goes from more particle to wave. So now you're using your mind, and now you're doing mind work. And so how do you take in this energy is the idea. And so now is when you use your breath. You use your breath to take in this energy that your mind is focused on when in this position. Hands up. You're firing off your extensor muscles, by the way. When you're looking directly up against gravity, you're firing off your anti-gravity muscles. So what is that doing? Yeah, it's integrating the reticular activating system, higher consciousness, higher focus. And so now you're working with energy, okay? Your mind is working with some powerful energy. So you use your breath, and this is the I guess the steps as to, so I like to explain things really in depth because I learned these things firsthand. I didn't have to open a book. I was divined this information. So this information I'm giving you, it's from source itself. Okay, so I would use my breath, and you want to breathe in with passion. Okay, just taking a breath doesn't, it's like, what is that? You breathe like what? No, you have to have this intention of taking in pure energy. At least, you see, this is the way I think. It's like, if I'm going to invite an energy into me, what would it be? The highest energy source. That's who I am. So I think, well, what, the purest energy. So it's using your breath. You envision taking in white, pure light. Within that white light is what I call the God particle. And so the God particle comes in within that white light, and where do you take it? Well, I believe that what physicists say when they say that there's an infinite amount of space within your atoms. It's mostly space. So I'm thinking, well, what would I invite into the infinite amount of space in my atoms if not source energy? And so with each breath, initially when I did this, I didn't really feel anything. It was the third day. So that's the only time I had to have faith. It was the first 3 days. Somehow I just kept doing it, and sometime I'll explain my first exercise, day 1, as to what I did and why. Essentially, it was firing off all my muscles, flexor muscles, starting off with this. I'm not gonna do it right now. You have to be pretty agile and focused to do that, and then extensor muscles. So each and every one. And the idea was to generate as much of a connection between the muscles of your body with mind and making it super focused. So, yeah. So essentially, you become focused. Where your mind becomes focused, you take in this God particle, and now essentially what you're doing is, after you open door number 1, immediately you go to mind. Butter, come here. Stay. So you go from mind to, after you open up door number 1, you immediately harness your mind, focus it on taking in this source energy, and then it's immediate that you start essentially using your mind to purify your spirit. And so the workout changes now from 2 hours of, I call it more primal, because we're dealing with the material plane. This is when it is completely acceptable and correct to take out your frustrations physically. And what you're doing is you're converting, like, let's say, if you have a bad experience the day before, or, you don't feel good about something, think about it, work it out. It's like, it's essentially converting this energy from negative to positive. And so I'll share with you my favorite word. It's Empyrean. And the reason why I love that word is because it's defined as the highest reaches of heaven. And I remember when I first read that, I'm like, these some bitches, they're coming up with, I thought heaven would be hard to get to, or heaven was a good enough place. But then they say highest reaches of heaven. It elevates your consciousness, because now you think even higher. And so I appreciate anytime I hear something like that, and expands my consciousness in the right direction. So, saying some bitches was just the opposite of that. Sorry about that. But there's another definition for the word Empyrean, which I had so much trouble accepting for ages. And that was, it's also a place of fire or light. And I thought, well, why fire? It's associated with hell, and I don't like that. I like the light part, but not the fire. And then years later, I realized it's explaining my workout. It's more the workout, the first 2 hours when you're being physical, you can be aggressive, you can be primal, and that's converting the fire into light. So, and then, it's like, really, when you're working out, you are burning calories, you're getting hot, you're expending energy. And the goal is to get from, having, like, let's say, stress. If you exercise enough in the right way, it's usually aerobic, at least 45 minutes, intense, at least 45 minutes. It has to be long enough that it breaks down cortisol, which in high amounts causes stress. It has to be long enough and intense enough that you are actually becoming your own pharmacy, where you start to create endorphins. So these painkillers, these natural painkillers, are really powerful. So you start integrating the feel-good chemistry in your body. So it's like an infinite chain reaction when you work out. It's not just, you get physical, you look better, that kind of stuff. You're going to feel better. You're going to think clearer. If you do it in nature, you add the element of spirit. The spirit's found in nature, okay? So all of these things, are triggered by the first 2 hours. Third hour, it changes to more wave state, and now you go from being primal, the fire, to the light. And the nature of the workout, I also say, it goes from masculine to more feminine. And so you're opening up your heart, you're taking in this energy, this breath, these breaths. Now you're working with more graceful energy, more beauty, more everything that's associated with positivity. The movements go from, being quick to sort of just now flowing. You start to work with this energy because you're taking in this energy, and now you're channeling it. So you're inviting it in, only the purest, only the good. And what ends up happening is, over time, you are taking in this energy, you're becoming more concentrated with it, and you want it to flow. You want it to not just be stagnant. So the movements start to turn towards sort of allowing that you become a conduit of it. So the third hour involves more movements like the Tai Chi, like Qigong, but it's not like, the way I would do it is, it's not like I would always do the same movements. No, I'm inspired to do these movements, and I feel the movements. And, I would do movements that are more, like I said, graceful, powerful, beauty. You start thinking these things, and then you feel them. That's what's wonderful, is you have access to these feelings, which normally you wouldn't have. You can create these feelings, and then, I had stopped practicing for a long time, so long that I was wondering if I could tap into it again. I was like, when I tapped into this, was it because I was young, I had the youthful energy, I'm older now, can I still do this? And finally, a few years ago now, I started to practice it. I was like, okay, let's see, how long will it take me? And I thought it would take longer for me to access this place again. And I found myself surprised that by the third day, I actually felt the superpower of connecting to source itself. It was overwhelming. It was so beautiful that I actually started crying. Literally, it was just so unexpected. It's so powerful. I'm like, dude, how could you not practice this? How did you forget how beautiful this feeling is? It is so powerful. The way I explain this connection, the only way I think I can explain this connection is by saying that the way I describe it is this. After years of thinking about it, I'm like, man, you can't explain it, except it finally hit me out. It's like, if you could take every beautiful experience you've ever had, no matter what it was, and essentially wrap it into one, it would be that feeling. So it's like, it could be a natural high from exercise, something like that, to a beautiful experience through a relationship, or a beautiful whatever it is, accomplishing something, finding something intriguing in the world, all of that wrapped into one. So it's like, it's not just that one thing, it's not just the other, which are all great, not to negate those experiences on their own, but having all of that in one, it is so grand, it is so big. You feel how big it is, you see how grand it is. So that's when you've connected. It's like, it leaves no doubt. And to go back to explaining, it's like the third day feeling the power. 3 days after that, manifesting becoming younger. It was essentially, so how can I say with surety that I became younger? Well, aside from feeling that I was glowing, like, let's say the third day after doing these practices of opening up my heart, breathing in really deeply, making myself more vulnerable to the universe, because that's what happens when you open your heart. It's not the easiest thing. That's not easy. But allowing yourself to do that, putting your faith in the universe, is what's going on. After 3 days of doing that, the universe would always send me someone who had no idea what I was doing. Like, nobody, I never shared with anybody that I was doing these exercises, that I was, trying to connect to higher information. Nobody knew, just me. So essentially, I was in class. I was going to chiropractic school at the time, and it was before class. And I remember standing near my desk, and I all of a sudden I felt like I was glowing. It's a very peculiar feeling, but it was very distinct, and that's exactly what I felt. And at that moment, I looked towards the entrance, door entrance to the classroom, and there was this guy named Alexander. He made a beeline right to me, and I'm looking at him, as he's making his way to me, and he goes, "Art, you're getting younger every single day." And I just remember I turn to him and I go, "I know." So, you see, I'm an information seeker, and a lot of beautiful things are being revealed to me, and I'm sharing this now because the world has changed, and this information needs to be out now. What I'm talking about is this energy system grid is way more malleable than we have ever been taught, and I think, a lot of people don't even realize it's possible. I'm going to be sharing with you, like information, like let's say when you work out a lot, you trigger something called neurogenesis, which is the creation of new brain cells. That's through movement. If you move enough, you create new brain cells. How does that work? Why? Well, I'm telling you. So, and then I'm going to give you a lot of information. Let's start focusing on that stuff. So what happens with these new brain cells? A lot of them just die off. Why? Well, these are my theories and my explanations, and like I said, I tapped into this power, so I don't have to prove anything to myself. But like I said, I like to have the information to be able to prove it to others that may want this information. The truth is, I love it. So why do a lot of these brain cells die off? My theory is because they need to have a goal or direction. For example, if you work out, you create new muscle cells along the lines of greatest resistance to force, where they're needed. If you grow these brain cells and then don't give them a direction to focus on, then they're going to prune themselves off. They're not needed. But so what I recommend is doing all this intense exercise and then having these goals that you focus on after this exercise. It's only beginning. You know, most people, after they work out that long and hard, they're done and they're happy, and that works. But it's only the beginning of manifesting. So, you know, have these goals and, you know, give your mind something to focus on, and all of a sudden, another bit of information that's interesting, really important, is that these new brain cells aren't like your existing brain cells. So what that means is they're actually more sensitive, or they fire more easily. They have a lower active potential, so threshold. So what that means is it takes less energy for them to fire off. Now, you know, using reason and logic, you think, okay, these new brain cells, they are more easily triggered than your existing brain cells. So that gives them a likelihood of creating greater change in your brain faster than anything else that I know of. In other words, you create these new brain cells, they're highly more active. You give them a direction to focus on or create. I believe that they're not limited like the existing brain cells that you already have. So now we're talking kind of like quantum theories and philosophy, which is my greatest love. So essentially, your existing brain cells have the limitations of, I can't get younger, or I can't fly, or, you know, this is not possible, or, you know, no. It's like, you know, I'm limited to these experiences, and I have a great grasp of reality, so I've never seen this, I've never witnessed this. That's just not the way reality works. That's how your existing brain cells are. If you tell the new brain cells that you want to do something like get younger, they're going to try to get you younger. If you're that focused, you've generated a lot of power through exercise. Well, you know, those brain cells don't have the limitations that you do. So think about that. And so these are all things, you know, that I've known about for a long time. I think the world is ready, and that's about, you know, everything I can think of right now as far as sharing my insights. I plan to do a lot more videos, give you a lot more insight as well as to, you know, how to work out, you know, where to start, and so on and so forth. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. Give it a like. It's for the YouTube algorithm, that kind of stuff. And thank you for listening, and thank you for your consideration. Be well. I love you. Bye. You guys ready to go? Yeah, they're ready to go. All right.